Hello guys, and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be looking at how to get better in Mythic Plus content as a healer. We're going to be looking at a lot of the important WeakAuras, Addons, we're going to be looking at Mouseovers, we're going to be looking at some of the basics and how to overcome that healing anxiety, especially for new players coming into World of Warcraft who are looking to start their healing journey. So in this video we're going to look at some of the basics, but maybe some of the players who are, again, playing healers for a long time might find something useful in terms of WeakAuras and Addons. Now, we're gonna start off with extremely basic things, and you can see my healer here right now, and basically how you want to heal as a healer. How do you want to click your buttons, or more commonly referred to as Mouseover macros and things like that. The first thing when you start your healing journey is getting, how do I say, you need to get as much information or important information as possible as a healer on your frames and things like that in order to know which person to heal, when to heal. And the whole concept of having healing anxiety comes from the fact that you might not have enough information. The more information you have, the less nervous you're going to feel. In Mythic Plus or raid content, I'm going to use this type of mechanic where you don't have to select the target and then click your heal. You can just mouse over them and then click specific keybind that you have associated with that heal to heal them. This saves you a split second in terms of optimizing your healing potential, and it's used by majority of people out there. Just to showcase quickly how you can do this, you can see here this is a group. I don't have to select any of these players right now here. I can just mouse over them and click my heals. This is going to be your bread and butter way of healing, and this is going to be used by everyone in the game right now. So how can you achieve that? Honestly, Blizzard has implemented some really good default functionality where you don't need add-ons whatsoever. So you can actually go into, again, you can go into options, you can go into keybinds, and you'll see something called click casting. And this is basically going to be, if you're familiar with an add-on called click, this is basically click, copy, or dupe, or whatever you want to call it. So I don't use this because I'm very comfortable with add-on called click itself. You can use Mouseover macros and make macros, but honestly, why would you? It just takes you so much more time to do that. If you have click casting enabled by Blizzard, or if you have an add-on called click, which what I'm using right now, so you can see it here. You can open your spellbook, you can open click bindings, and you can see all of my keybinds set up here. How do you start off with keybinds? You can literally just open this window and you see like Living Flame, and I'm going to be like, hey, I want to cast this on a friendly target when I press shift left click, and you just click on it by pressing shift left click, and you can see here it's been created. That's it. You don't have to make any Mouseover macros, you don't have to do anything like that. If you want to add additional configurations, this is basically creating macros on the fly, very fast. You can right click on this and you can be enable disable binding set, and you can be like, this can only be used on a friend, this can only be used on enemy, or you can have global binding where you don't have to require a targeting at all. This works for abilities like efflorescence and things like that where you don't have to target a person. You can also see that I actually have bounded left button for reversion, and right button you can see here is going to be casting Emerald Blossoms. I've done this for every single healer where I bind my left and right click button for certain major abilities depending on which healer you're playing. So I can move and I can click left and I click right button and it's going to cast the heal. You might ask yourself, how am I going to open menus? How am I going to select the players? You can see in click you have an option to have show unit menu, and you have target click unit, and this is all done with alt. So if I need to select a person in order to whisper them or trade them, I click alt left click and I select them, and if I need to open the menu, I alt right click to have the options menu. This is how I've done for every single healer. You don't have to do it, but this is, I'm very familiar with this because it gives me additional buttons to bind, especially for healers that have a lot of buttons to press. Another thing is movement, and this is very basic. So a lot of the times, the way I have my keybind set up in terms of movement keys, I have strafe left and strafe right set as the default A and D buttons. So I can have my hand right here and I can dodge abilities or move by just pressing A or D. This is one of the best ways to have your character's movement keybind set up, because it just allows you for your right hand or whatever to click cast and allows you to heal, but allows you to heal others. A lot of people will have it set up like that. Another way of doing Mouseover buttons, and this is mainly for PvP players or someone who do Mythic Plus content or small groups, is having keybinds set up for your group member 1, group member 2, group member 3. So for example, you might have it set up to something like 1. Number 1 will select your group member 1, and then you'll use your keybind to heal them with an associated or appropriate keybind that you set up. This is something that people use in PvP, and something that quite a few people might use in Mythic Plus environment, because you can have 5 keybinds to select target 1, target 2, target 3. You don't have to use a mouse over, you don't have to, you basically, your mouse over or mouse button is free to do whatever they want, because you're using your keys to do majority of your healing. This can be appropriate to be used in smaller content, but once you go to raids, you cannot have keybinds for like 20 people. So this goes out the window. Now let's go to the add-on WeakAuras section, and no matter how you feel about add-ons or WeakAuras, they do give you a distinct advantage in Mythic Plus and raids, because this game is not made fairly out of the box. Out of the box, UI has improved significantly over the years, but you still have WeakAuras and add-ons that are going to make your healing journey a lot easier and give you a distinct advantage. Straight away, I'm going to go into the default Mythic Plus package that probably most people are using right now. This is Costies. This is something that I've used for a long time in Mythic Plus and raids. You can go onto wago.io website. All the links are going to be included in the description. If you install this package out of the box, it's pretty good, and you can, again, there is information here that you can install another add-on called Shared Media Costies. Again, links in the description below. You can do this. This is going to add notifications or extra voice notifications to certain abilities. So make sure to install this add-on. You can go into the sound settings in order how to do this. So just to showcase some of the default configurations you can do, you can open up your WeakAuras, again, /WA, and you can go to the icon pack. Again, I have a heavily modified version of this for my own liking, but you can go into icons and you can be like, you can see that this icon, or you can see that this ability right here, Thirst for Blood, which is basically a fixed ability, is going to have a voice notification. It has a sound associated with it. Then you can go into actions, and in actions you can most likely will see play sound, and it says fixate, and you can click into this and change it to something else. Maybe you don't want it to be fixate, maybe you want it to be something else, and that's how you can configure this WeakAuras package to give you different voice notifications. You don't have to do that, because out of the box, this WeakAuras package will provide you with most notifications that you need in Mythic Plus, in terms of dodging abilities, in terms of getting fixates, in terms of, hey, I need to move out of this. Another healing specific WeakAuras that I think most healers will need to have is going to be targeted spells. And this has been updated multiple times over the expansions, because it was used by so many different people. Now this WeakAuras, the advantage of this WeakAuras is going to be the fact that it's going to place an icon on a player that's being targeted by certain abilities. If you know there's going to be a certain icon placed on a player, you know they're going to be taking some damage in the next second or two, and you can actually start pre-healing them or focusing on them, and you know, you won't be surprised by like, hey, this guy just went down to half HP, what happened? If you have this WeakAuras, you'll know that they're being targeted by something, and you need to prepare your heals. Genuinely something that you need to have for most healers out there. Honestly, other classes could use this as well, especially for classes that can do some off healing, because this is going to be immensely helpful. Just import this WeakAuras and just let it be there. It'll do most of the work and load when it's needed. Now, another WeakAuras that works somewhat similar to the targeted WeakAuras that I found to be very useful in Season 2 is going to be Mythic Plus Healer Focus Assist for Dragonflight Season 2. And you can import it, and this is going to assign or highlight a player with like a red line around them, indicating that they need healing, they have a pretty bad debuff, or they have a fixate and they need consistent healing, or they might need healing in the next couple of seconds. This is going to allow you, for example, if you don't know what a dungeon does exactly, or the trash bags do, if you see a player with a red highlight around them, you need to heal them, or you need to focus them for that given period, which honestly is going to be amazing for new players coming into dungeons where they might not know all the mechanics. But this basically tells you, hey, this player needs healing, heal them up, and you know exactly who to heal and when to heal. And honestly, this is really great and works with majority of healing add-ons out there, things like Grid 2, LVUI, again, Voodoo and things like that. No matter what healing frames you're using, this is going to work. Honestly, really great. Now let's talk about other add-ons besides WeakAuras, and there are quite a few. Again, health frame add-ons. You're going to be spending most of your time looking, or again, a lot of your time will be spent looking at health frame add-ons, and that is going to be very important as a healer, because again, there is a tunnel vision effect. We'll talk about that later down in the video, but health frame add-ons, again, this is going to be your bread and butter. And the big three right now, the most popular health frame add-ons that I've seen used by high-end players is going to be Grid 2, Voodoo, or LVUI default frames. They are very popular, because if you're willing to invest some time in terms of to tinker with those add-ons and customize them, they're extremely customizable. And I'm using Grid 2, and I've been using Grid 2 for a long time. If you want to add debuffs to your frames, you can go into, again, statuses, debuffs, raid debuffs, and you can go into Aberus, and you can see all the debuffs that you can enable, disable, highlight, change color. A lot of customization here. If you're not willing to do that, or if you don't have a good profile that you can import and things like that, default frames from Blizzard are more than good enough to be used by majority of players out there. Again, at the end of the day, Blizzard provides a decent package out of the box. It does lack customization if you want to change a couple of things, so that's probably the biggest negative downside. But if you're not willing to mess around with add-ons, default frames are more than good enough. Just a side note, I think one of the most popular healing frame or health frame add-ons for new players is going to be Healbot, but from my anecdotal information, I know very few players who do high-end Mythic rating or high-end Mythic Plus that still use Healbot. I don't know why that is. If you're watching this video right now, leave a comment below on why you think, in my opinion, the popularity of Healbot diminishes significantly when you're trying to do high-end content. I don't know what it is, but the big three right now, in my opinion, is Grid 2, Voodoo, or LVI default frames. Another add-on that people might be using are the deadly boss mods, and in my opinion, and again, you can see my character right here, I am still using DBM. A lot of people might actually kind of laugh at this to some extent, because a lot of people might be using bigwigs and things like that. I actually believe DBM provides a lot of, how do I say, out of the box, DBM is very, very good. You don't have to configure a lot of things. You might have to use certain, you might have to move certain bars and things like that. For example, you can start test bars and you can change the locations and things like that. You might have to do that. But besides that, the most important thing that DBM provides is the voice notifications that are coming by default. So if you go to spoken alerts, make sure you have VEM enabled. And this is going to give you voice notifications, especially in Mythic Plus environment, when you need to dodge something. For example, you can go to boss mod options right here. You can go to something like, let's say we go to Battle of Azeroth because we want to load Freehold. So if you're doing Freehold right now, and you can go to the trash section, Freehold trash, and let's say you're doing the rat pack or something like that, and you need to move away from rat traps, this is going to give you a specific voice notification telling you, hey MadSkillz, you need to move away.
Watch your step.
And some of the WeakAuras might not do that. There are certain packages, again, big disclaimer, if you have good WeakAuras for Mythic Plus or raids, you don't actually have to use DBM or bigwigs or anything like that, because some of the WeakAuras completely replace the need for these add-ons. I still feel certain add-ons like DBM, and again, you can still use them to get that additional voice notifications, because I'm mainly using DBM for voice notification. If you're someone who's willing to tinker with these add-ons, I think bigwigs is better. I think bigwigs has a lot of options that are really interesting, but out of box, I think DBM is the king. No modification whatsoever. It's going to load you with a bunch of information and a bunch of notifications, and I think it's just a great way to do it. Again, you can tinker with this, or you can use bigwigs. These are my two recommendations right now. A little side note, if you want to change the way that it looks in terms of what it looks like for me, you can have an additional add-on called add-on skins. And again, you can go to add-on skins right here, and you can go into general, and you can say DBM half bar skin, and this is going to make your DBM look the way that, again, I showed you a couple of seconds ago. Just a little side note if you want to change the way the DBM looks. A lot of people also ask me about the middle icon that I see in my screen when the big cooldown is being shown. So for example, I'm using a specific WeakAura that I made for every single class in terms of, let's say, for a Shaman cooldown template, and I have triggers set for every ability for something like Mana Tide Totem that's going to show up in the middle of my screen when it's available to be used. Now, if you don't want to use WeakAuras, there's another add-on that you can use that does something very, very similar. Now, I have not used this before, I have not configured with this before, but you can use something like Doom Cooldown Pulse, which does something, again, something very similar to what I just said a couple of seconds ago. You can try it out, you can mess around with this. It's probably easier than using WeakAuras. Again, let me know how it goes. Now, a very quick mention of OmniCD, because I did do videos about this previously. But this add-on is very important because it's going to allow you to track other player cooldowns, other player defensive abilities, health stones, health pots. And it's very important because if you're a new player or a new healer coming into World of Warcraft and someone dies in a dungeon, you can be like, hey, why didn't you use a health stone? Why didn't you use a health pot? Why didn't you use a defensive? Because it is going to give you reasons, because players are going to attack you sometimes. They're going to be like, why didn't I get a heal? Why did I die? What are you doing as a healer? And you can be like, if a person dies in a dungeon, Mythic Plus, raids or whatever, and they didn't use their health potion, or if they didn't use a specific defensive, that is ammunition for you as a healer to be? Why didn't you make my job easier? Now, how do you configure OmniCD? You can open OmniCD/OmniCD. You can go into things like spell editor, and in terms of adding health potions, it's actually kind of difficult, but in spell ID, just enter this. You can see here 370511. You enter this, you set the cooldown to 300, you make sure it's under trinkets and under consumables. And then you go into dungeons, then you go into spells, then you go into your trinkets, and then you make sure that health stones or health pots are ticked. You can do the same for health stones, but it really depends if you have a warlock in your group, so that is dependent on the current group composition. Again, you can go to spell editor and you can add health stones in terms of the spell ID. So this is what I do. You can do a bunch of other things in terms of what spells to track for evokers, for hunters and things like that. You can configure this in multiple different ways, and allowing you to track defensive cooldowns, health pots is going to be very, 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 very important, especially in Poke Mythic Plus content. Now let's talk about how to improve as a healer in terms of getting your talents right, in terms of getting your embellishments, in terms of getting your gearing and things like that. A lot of people might be looking at guides and things like that, and there's plenty guides for every single healer out there that'll help you to optimize your healing style, your talents and things like that. But what I like to do once in a while is check what other top-end Mythic Plus players or raiders or whatever, what are they doing in terms of talent. You can use Rated.io in terms of checking out what is becoming meta or what is very strong, but you can see here under Mythic Plus, you can go into spec leaderboards, and for example, I want to check out what some of the shamans are using. Now I'm going to scroll down here, I'm going to look at restoration. You can see some of the top performing Mythic Plus resto shamans here. I can click into them and I'm going to be like, okay, this is the gear that they're using right now, this is the trinkets that they're using, and you can click into talent calculator and see, okay, this guy is using this talent build for class and this talent build for spec. I can try again, I can copy it, I can try it out, I can see how it works for me. Now this is only one person. What if you want to look at a bigger sample size? You can use things like Subcreation. Subcreation is a very popular website because it provides tier lists, which I think, again, there's a lot of issues with that, but you can click into Mythic Plus Season 2, you can click it, again, I'm going to check out Restoration Shaman most popular talent builds, I'm going to click into Resto Shaman, and you can see here, you need to know what to do with this information, because certain talent builds for 24s is not going to be mandatory if you're doing plus 10 keys. But you can see this talent build right here, it's been used in 24 keys or max key 24. You can click on the calculator and you can see like, okay, this talent build is very popular, I'm going to try it out, I'm going to test it out in some of the keys that I'm doing. Now, another advantage of Subcreation is the fact that it's going to showcase some of the most popular embellishments. For example, here, you can see here the most popular embellished items might be used, or the Spore Cloak. This is very, very popular. Another item is the Venom Steep Stompers. Again, things like Elemental Lariats is going to go down because it's not the best embellishment right now. It's going to change, but most people still have it equipped from Season 1. Pinch of Salt, you need to know what to do with this information. Don't just blindly follow the talents that you see here. Don't just blindly follow the top Mythic Plus pushers. You need to know why they're picking certain talents. Ask them in streams and things like that. Again, learn how to improve your class. Learn how to get better with your class in Mythic Plus and things like that. And these sites are pretty popular ways of determining talent builds, or determining stats, or determining embellishments. And now let's go to the last section of the video, and that is going to be how to defeat anxiety as a new healer. Because I know for a fact the biggest barrier of entry for new healers coming into World of Warcraft in Season 2 in terms of Dragonflight is going to be, am I good enough, or anxiety when it comes to healing. Because healing is an important role right now. It is a very important role when doing something like tyrannical keys, because the biggest differentiating factor for a group that's going to succeed in something like a tyrannical key and a group that's going to deplete a key might be healer's output, because there is a lot of healing checks out there. And if you're a new healer coming into World of Warcraft, you're not aware of those healing checks, you might have a big, or how do I say, a bad time. The way to defeat anxiety is getting as much, or knowing as much as possible, getting WeakAuras, getting add-ons, knowing boss mechanics, knowing healing check. If you want me to do a healing check series on this channel, let me know, because I might try and cover every single boss in terms of healing checks and how to min-max. And the most important thing that you need to remember, not every single death is going to be your fault. I know it feels weird, because once you start playing a healer, you feel like every single death is going to be your responsibility, every single mistake is going to be your responsibility, because it's your job to heal them all. You cannot heal stupid. There is going to be a lot of pugs out there who are going to take avoidable damage, who are going to get almost one shot because they don't know the boss mechanics, and you don't need to feel bad about not being able to heal them, because it is not your fault. That is important. Every time someone dies, it is not always your fault, and you need to remember that. I talked about this previously in the video, but having OmniCD and tracking health pots, tracking health stones, tracking defensive cooldowns is important, because when someone dies, you can be like, why didn't you use a health stone? My personal opinion, anytime a person dies in Mythic Plus or raids and they don't, or they have not used a health potion, it is their fault. They died because they didn't use a health potion. It is completely up to them. If they did use a health potion, if they did use a defensive, then you need to start looking at your own performance, looking at how you can prioritize that person. I also advise a lot of healers to always be casting. A lot of new players coming into World of Warcraft, they're like, okay, everyone's full HP, everyone's topped up, I can just sit there and chill. No. In order to optimize your healer when there's nothing to be healed, help out the group by providing some DPS. There's a bunch of classes out there that will heal through DPS. For example, Preservation Evoker with Fire Breath, and depending on which specific talents you've picked in terms of Life Force Mender and things like that, or Life Giver's Flame, you want to use Fire Breath in order to provide healing. This goes especially for the Swing Priest who heal through damage. There should never be a moment where you as a healer feel like, I'm just gonna sit there and do nothing. There's always something to do. If everyone's full HP, help out with the DPS. If you need healing, you heal them, obviously. So it is all dependent on how you're going to be playing your healer, but always be casting. Another thing that a lot of healers are going to fall into is the tunnel vision of paying only attention to health frames. You can see here right now, this is my grid 2 location. It might not work for you. A lot of people in Mythic Plus situations like to place grid 2 or their health frames somewhere on the left side. This seems to be like one of the default options right now. It is important to not get the tunnel vision of where you're only paying attention for health frames, you're healing, and then you forget that there's a swirly underneath your feet and you just die to damage. It is, again, you need to make sure you're paying attention to health frames, but you're also paying attention to stuff or bad stuff that's happening close to your frontals, especially important for melee healers like Holy Paladin or Mistweaver Monk in Mythic Plus situations, because you need to pay attention to frontals, but you also need to pay attention to what's happening to your party. So health frame placement is going to be dependent on, it's going to depend on your preferences. I like to place it here because in raids, I'm placing my grid 2 here regardless, and I'm very used to this. So very, very important, tunnel vision. It's going to take practice to step away from that tunnel vision of health frames, because honestly, if I take a break from WoW for like 2 or 3 months and I come back, I am always spending way too much time on health frames and I don't pay attention to what's going on around my character. Time will help you with this. Practice and time is going to alleviate this issue. And guys, this has been my whole video in terms of WeakAuras add-ons and how to help with healer anxiety. Honestly, knowledge is king. I know it sounds really cheesy or corny or whatever, but knowledge is power. The more you know about your class, dungeon, have the right WeakAuras add-ons and things like that, the more comfortable you're going to feel with your healer and the more comfortable you're going to feel when healing those dungeons. Let me know if there's any WeakAuras add-ons that I missed out that could be amazing for new healers coming into World of Warcraft. It is a very demanding role because you will get flamed, and this is something very important to know. You will get negative feedback, you will get people who are toxic, and this is my pet peeve. And this goes for players who are extremely toxic in Mythic Plus and things like that. If you're toxic towards someone, if you say, hey, this healer is terrible, this healer is so bad, why are you healing, uninstall the game, why not give them constructive criticism? Why not be like, hey, you need to use a different talent build, you need to use a cooldown here, you need to move away from this mechanic. Why not be constructive with your criticism rather than just being, instead of just flaming people and just telling them they're bad? Be constructive with your criticism. There's a lot of players who are coming into this game who don't know, who might be new to the game. They know the tactics, but they haven't tried the boss. There's no substitute for actually trying dungeons versus reading about a dungeon. So be constructive when you're being negative and help out a player and help them learn something new. Help them learn new mechanics, new tips and tricks. That is something that is like my announcement to a lot of players out there. But you will get negative feedback, you will get flamed as a healer, because again, this game can be toxic in Mythic Plus environment. You need to have a thick skin, you need to get as much knowledge as possible. And let me know if you would like to see a series where I try and look into Mythic Plus in terms of dealing with high healing checks, because there's a lot of high healing checks right now, especially in Tyrannical Keys. There are a couple of fortified trash mobs that are insanely hard. Let me know, guys. Let me know if you missed out on something, and I'll see you in my next video.